Hello and welcome to sports. Sometimes. My name is Chris Crawford. Thank you so much for joining us. This is like episode 15, but it's episode 2 on YouTube. Appreciate everyone who checked out the episode with David Roth. No, not that one, the actual good one. I really appreciated the support. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, all those YouTube things. My guest today is someone I'm really excited to have on. He is a podcaster, he is a New York Times bestseller, and most importantly, he is a fellow suffering Seattle Mariner fan. Please welcome Mike Duncan. Mike, how's it going today?
That's going pretty well. Thank you very much for having me on.
You bet. Really appreciate you doing this. It's probably a little different than the podcast that you do for the most part. You get to talk about some sports sometimes, but usually the subject is more in passing. We'll talk a little bit more about sports, but I wanted to ask you in particular. We talk about the Mariners. You see the jersey behind me right there. That guy who's been a pretty important part of my life and probably a big part of your life. So you are a Seattle Mariner fan. What, other than geography, what turned you on to the Seattle Mariners, and how has that experience been going for you?
Oh, I mean, look, it's geography, right?
Yes.
That's what pulls us in originally because
Sure.
I was born and raised in Redmond.
Right.
Technically, if I'm out of the Pacific Northwest now, so when people ask where I'm from, I say Seattle. But then if people are actually
Yes.
from Seattle, I go, well, I'm from Redmond, and then they go, okay, and I go, well, at least we're better than the people from Mercer Island. Um, so that's really it's geography, and I grew up in the 80s, right? That's when I was coming of age. So the first baseball games that I remember going to were like 1985 in the Kingdom.
Oh,
And
beautiful.
my dad, my mom, both branches of my family were huge baseball fans. And so we would go to 10, games on average a year. And I would park at my dad's building downtown, walk over there. You could bring in food, you could bring in sandwiches. It's like you and 3,000 people in this concrete dome. And, my dad's philosophy about going to all these games early on when the Mariners stunk was to talk up what real Major League Baseball players we were going to get to see because they were
Sure.
playing such and such a team. Like, oh, it's really exciting to go see the Tigers because they got Lou Whitaker and Alan Trammell. When the Blue Jays would come to town, it'd be Jesse Barfield and George Bell, right? These great, great names of the past. And he would even do stuff like, Tom Seaver played for the Red Sox in 1986. And so like the Red Sox, I was 6 years old. And so the Red Sox came to town and I actually have since gone back and looked this up on Baseball Reference to make sure that I wasn't misremembering anything. But yeah, he absolutely took us to see Tom Seaver pitch. So,
That's amazing.
so those are the things like early days Mariner fandom was like the Mariners are here in order to host an actual Major League Baseball team that you will watch play.
That's a fun way to put it. And that was kind of my early initiation to it as well. My very first baseball game I got to watch at the Kingdom. Ricky Henderson hit a leadoff homer, and I was
Great.
5. So this was 1988, and I was really confused. He's just jogging. Go get the ball, throw it. You're gonna get him. I just didn't get the rules. So and then my dad was like, "No, I think go over the fence. There's nothing we can do." And I think they lost that game like 16-4 or something like that. It's
Sure,
kind of interesting.
that sounds pretty normal.
Yeah, it does sound very normal. It's kind of interesting. Where I fell in love with the Mariners is actually so my very first baseball game that I ever watched on television was Game 7 of the 1991 World Series. It was between Atlanta and Minnesota. It's
Sure.
arguably one of the greatest baseball games of all time.
Sure.
Certainly one of the greatest World Series of all time. And I just fell in love with that Minnesota Twins team, like Kirby Puckett and Jack Morris. It's interesting. My opinions on Jack Morris changed considerably over the next few years, but he was a terrific pitcher. There's nothing wrong with saying that he was a terrific pitcher. It's just, his Hall of Fame case was a little bit not the best. But when I fell in love with the Mariners was when they made the uniform change. When they made the change in 1993 to those. Look, I appreciate them now. Heck, I've got a hat right here with the colors. I appreciate those blue and yellows. But when they made those change to the teal color, and I watched Ken Griffey Jr. like up close and got to see him play actually 20 to 30 games in those uniforms. It's funny. That was such a big deal to get to see some of those games. Now you can watch every game so easily, maybe not as easily going forward. But there was something about that uniform change, and like they seemed more modern, and it just became so much more of an aesthetic feeling watching that swing in those pretty uniforms compared to uniforms that we like appreciate a little bit more now, Mike, but maybe weren't the best for
No,
1992.
it's so interesting that you mentioned that specifically because I was 12 going on 13 when the uniform switch happened.
Nice.
And I distinctly remember at the time, actually, the next baseball team I was on, my 13-year-old baseball team, we were the Mariners, as just
Nice.
like drawing names out of a hat, like what team
Yeah,
are you?
sure.
And so we wore those new, like the new hats for that first year, and I distinctly remember thinking at the time, like they look like a real baseball team now.
Mm, yep.
Those old uniforms with just the S, and it kind of was like Mariners. It all seemed a little minor league to me. It all felt
Yeah.
kind of minor leagueish to me. And that new design, I still love the designs. Every
Me too.
once in a while, I'm like, maybe we should do a rebrand. It has been a long time, but like they looked great, and I remember that very specifically as I agree with you as a moment when the team kind of clicked into its own, having just come off of actually having a winning record. Because
Yeah.
the first memory I have of since we're just reminiscing now,
Yeah. Of course.
but the first like critical opinion that I had about baseball, because when you're young, you just sort of accept whatever is happening. You're not armchair quarterbacking a team when you're 6.
No.
But when they had a winning record in 1991 and then immediately fired Jim Lefevre, I
Yeah.
remember reading that and being like, that doesn't seem like what you should do when you have the guy who finally like won more games than he lost. And then they got rid of him.
Yeah.
And then Bill Plummer came in and then we lost
Oh,
like, I don't know, like more than 100 games, I think in 92. And then they do the switch. And then it's all really uphill from there. Being a
yeah.
Seattle sports fan in the 1990s actually fucking ruled. Like it was great. It was
It
great.
was the best. It
Yeah.
was the best. Like the Huskies were still a quality football team. The Supersonics, who I just
Yes.
miss so much. They
Oh
were
yeah.
so fun. George Carl and
George Carl Supersonics and Lou Piniella Mariners. Those
yeah,
eras we had great players, great teams,
yeah,
lots of fun. The Seattle fan base is amazing. Like it's a great sports community and always has been and always will be. So like those were real golden days,
they
golden
were.
days. Yeah.
And I think as kids we would have accepted the 2023 Seattle Mariners and would have or 2024 Seattle Mariners and said, this is a pretty darn good year. It was probably the most frustrating year I've had as a fan of the Seattle Mariners, Mike. Does it rank
Yeah.
pretty high up there for you too?
Yeah, I did not. I had a really difficult time actually just connecting
Mm,
with the team this season. I was really, really like 2021, 22, 23, all of those years I felt really deeply invested in what was happening and I was watching tons of games. And was with everything like right down to the wire. And just this year, like I had a bunch of stuff in my life going on. So like I wasn't
sure.
able to sort of watch as much as I could, but I was always paying attention to what was going on. It just felt like little spurts of life and then just malaise and failure and then little spurts of life. And you're like, I like this team, but this is another one of these, like everybody is spectacularly underperforming.
Yes.
Like all of like Wither Ty France, like I love Ty France. I think
Yeah.
Ty France was a great player. He's not the best Mariner of all time.
No.
But he's definitely in this little pantheon that I have of Mariner players who I loved and will always look back on fondly. And then it's just like, oh well, now Ty France is gone. It's just a little thing, but him not, rising to any occasion. Nobody else seeming to rise to any occasion.
Yeah.
Julio being, well, is he going to do it or is he going to
Yeah.
be Dustin Ackley? Like, what's going on here? Yeah.
Yeah. No, I totally get it. And, it was as a guy who recaps every single game on YouTube, it was more of a chore than I thought it was going to be. And that's disappointing because there's, like you said, this is one of the most likable Seattle Mariner teams in terms of like players that they
Oh,
have,
sure.
like
Yeah.
Big Dumper is so likable. Julio's smile can just light up a room.
JP Crawford is great.
JP Crawford is super likable.
Luis Castillo is like one of my favorite Mariner pitchers of all time.
Without question. It's so frustrating how much criticism he gets just based on the fact that he's actually getting paid a decent salary. It's one of the things that bothers me maybe more than anything else. Is there anything in the particular in the offseason you'd like to see him do?
Oh, well, I mean, sign Juan Soto would be
Yeah, that would be
fantastic. I
cool.
mean, let's
That'd be
let's
cool.
let's go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
Who I was really, but I did want him to make a play for Juan Soto when he was leaving
Yeah.
the Padres, and but
Yes.
that's when we got Luis Castillo, and I was like, okay, I mean, it's not precisely what I wanted, but like
Sure.
that was I mean, in terms of like my opinion of Dipoto, it's like sometimes
Mhm.
I'm like, God, you're terrible at this, and sometimes I'm like, oh, actually, that was a pretty good deal that you
Oh,
cut
yeah.
for us. Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah.
Um, but like, should we go get Pete Alonso? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
we don't
Yeah.
we don't have a first baseman. We could
No.
use, I don't know, some, like, this is the story. This is what drives me crazy is like it's always the same thing, it feels like, which is like, oh, well, we can pitch and we've got pretty good defense, but like, oh, the hitting is just atrocious. This has been a ongoing problem
Right.
for 15 years, like this specific thing. And,
Sure.
except for the, kind of the Robinson Cano, Kyle Seager, Nelson Cruz little
Yeah.
triumvirate that we had for a
Yeah.
while, which was, that was great. That was
It
hot as
was
it goes.
awesome. Yeah.
But yeah, like we just need some pop in the
Yeah.
lineup. That's what we need more than anything else right now. So I think there's a guy out there who could do it, and I would like to see the Seattle Mariners, who should not be skinflints, who should not be, excuse me, not I always misuse that word. That skinflint's not the right word. But should not be misers about their money,
Yes.
and go put
Yeah.
a team together that's going to win the West every year, and then watch the money roll in. Like that's how you should watch the money roll in.
When we're done with this, I will definitely be looking up the correct way to use skinflints.
Skinflint means you spend money wantonly.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Okay.
And I always accidentally use it the wrong way, but I already
Well,
corrected myself. So
yeah.
if you've hopped into the YouTube comments to correct my usage of the word skinflint, I was there before you.
um, I think Alonso would be interesting. The guy I'd really like to get is Christian Walker, who is on top of being a really good hitter, a fantastic defensive first baseman as well.
Yeah.
Alonso, not the greatest defensive player, but adding that thump would be great to see. Speaking of adding thump, so the Los Angeles Dodgers signed Blake Snell to a
Mhm.
5-year, $183 million contract,
They did.
which will end up being like 5 years, $200 million with deferrals and all that stuff. And of course, I work for NBC Sports. I do aggregate stuff. So I've stopped tweeting on Twitter, but I have to use it for work because I aggregate news. And I just happened to log in and see the world collapsing at the signing of Blake Snell and how people immediately started screaming that baseball is broken and that if they don't add a salary cap, the sport will not survive. Number
Right.
one, I think that's pretty clearly nonsense. But I will ask you, Mike, do you believe that there should be a salary cap in baseball?
No, not really. I think that there should be a salary floor.
Same.
I would absolutely love to see that. I think that the main problem is not rich teams spending too much. It is quote unquote poor teams
Yes.
who are not spending and hiding behind all of these sort of, oh, we're just small beans, like we can't compete with you. It's like, well, you could anytime you wanted to.
Yeah.
You could if you wanted to. So I'm, one of the things that sort of I've come to over the years, because we've both been on this arc, since, I mean, we were both around for the strike. We both remember the strike in '94,
Sure.
which was widely portrayed as like these ungrateful athletes who,
Yes.
are getting paid to just hit a ball with a stick, who are getting all of this money, and then they're demanding even more money. So aren't they the problem? And the problem is not them. The problem is not the salaries that the players make, because they're being paid without a salary cap what they are worth
Yes.
to ownership, what they are worth to the game. These are billion-dollar franchises. This is a multi-billion-dollar sport that we're all engaged with, and the idea that the athletes, who are both the labor and the product, should not be the ones primarily benefiting from the largesse that is
Sure.
created by all of this sports interest that we have. I definitely want it to go towards the players more
Right.
than the owners. So and a salary cap is a way for ownership to limit player payroll. That's what it's there for. And so I don't think that a salary cap is going to create the kind of competitive balance that people are looking for to begin with, because number one, unless it comes with a salary floor, it's not for anything. And then also, you know, you're just creating a system whereby any and all profits will go into the coffers of a few billionaires rather than the players themselves. And I'm just kind of fundamentally politically, my worldview is does not like that dynamic.
100% agreed. I thought about what it would take for me to accept a salary cap if I was John Q, MLBPA. I would need 55-45 revenue split, 55 to the players, 45 to ownership. I would need a salary floor. There has to be a salary floor if there's going to be a salary cap. I don't think
Sure.
that there's any doubt about
Yeah,
that.
for sure.
And the big one for me is I would seriously consider it if we got rid of the 6-year player rule to start contracts, where if we could get rid of the 3-year arbitration and the 3-year pre where they are just making a pittance of money. And especially for I keep thinking about pitchers, Mike, and how many of these guys are flaming out because of how hard they throw.
Yeah.
Like, I would want to get my money now.
Yep.
Like now. And so it's one of the things like I don't blame any player when they hold out because you just don't know what's going to happen next. But those would kind of be my ultimate, like, if you could give me those, I might consider it. And you better have something like 350 million for your salary cap as well, something along those lines.
It better be big. And like, I mean, one of the things that we've seen over the last few years, and one of these, like, sort of when you go back to like the blogging days of like the aughts, like it's the Bush years, and we've all got Google Reader, and we're reading Lookout Landing, and we're reading USS Mariner.
Yes.
And we have all of these like great new insights into analytics and how to actually actually capture value, and we make fun of all these like huge contracts that would get doled out to like the Josh Hamiltons or Albert Pujols of the world. Like, this is insane. Or to call back, when they go give a bunch of money to George Bell because he had a bunch of RBIs one year, and you're like, okay, here's a fat contract for you, and we would make fun of that, and then all of that was then taken and turned into how to depress player salaries,
Right.
and how to have people go through that 6 years and then the arb years of being woefully, and I mean woefully, underpaid for the value that they are providing their franchises. This is all meant to be okay because there's a huge free agent payoff at the end of it, and teams were making those payoffs. They were delivering these huge salaries, and now players are coming to the end of that 6 whatever year period and finding teams being like, well, we plugged it into the algorithm, and you should only be getting this and this, and like, so they're getting squeezed on both sides. And I do think that something needs to change about the draft, the control years, how we treat minor leaguers, like all of that needs to fundamentally change before we start dealing with things like, should it be the case that owners can't give players more money anymore? Like, I don't think that should be the thing. And I absolutely don't think it'll fix competitive balance in baseball.
No, it's always going to be in every sport, even in a sports with salary caps, there's going to be top heaviness. And it is just, it's the nature of competitiveness in life as well. There are going to be things that are better than other things. You are not going to see, unfortunately, everybody have the same level of success. You want to play my baseball reference game?
Sure.
Okay, so here's what
I have no idea what the baseball reference game is.
Well, that's the thing. That's great.
Perfect.
Because nobody does, and it's still a
go.
lot of fun. Yeah. So here's what I like to do, Mike, because I am a dork. You talked about baseball reference earlier. I love team pages, and I just love going to a certain year and looking at a team and just like seeing how bad they were, how great they were, but like really like remembering some guys, to bring it back to the David Roth.
Sure.
But what I was finding is that, so when you go to the team page, they will show the list of the 12 players who had the highest WAR on that team. So what I would do is I would go to a random team page. I would scroll all the way back past the top, where it shows the win-loss, the everything else. And I would go right to those 12 and I would look at the WAR, and I would see if I could guess how many games that team won. So I'm going to give you 2 teams, Mike. And I'm going to give you the WAR, and you're going to guess how many games these teams won. Are you ready?
Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah. It's you know what? It's fun, but it is kind of difficult.
I just sat forward in my chair a little bit, like I'm bracing for impact. I'm ready.
All right.
I'm ready.
Here we go. And you know what? The other thing I'm going to do for you, Mike, is I'm going to tell you when it's a pitcher that has this when the pitcher comes up, because I've found that 5-win seasons for a pitcher are different than 5 wins for a hitter. So here we go.
Okay, appreciate that.
7.1 pitcher, 3.7, 3.4 pitcher, 2.5 pitcher, 2.2, 1.3, 1.2, 1.2, 1.2 pitcher, 0.9, 0.8, and 0.7 pitcher.
0.7 pitcher. Okay, hang on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10, 12. This feels like about a 72 win team.
It's not a bad guess. This was a 61 win team. This was the 2010 Seattle Mariners.
Great. And love that team.
That team wasted a heck of a season from Felix Hernandez. And so then second on that team.
Is that Iwakuma?
No, that is Cliff Lee. That was third.
That was the Cliff Lee year.
That was the Cliff Lee year. Yeah. God. Man. What an absolute waste of just a fantastic pitching staff. And I wish we could say that that's the first time that happened, Mike, but not so much. Not so much. All right.
I was walking on a street in Austin, Texas with my wife when I opened my phone and saw that we had gotten Cliff Lee.
Oh, wow.
And literally whooped. I was like, oh my God. Because I love Cliff Lee because I have a real fetish for pitchers who work fast.
Yes.
Especially back in the day before the pitch clock, guys like Mark Burley, guys like Cliff Lee, who were both amazing and just like worked quickly. Like these are my very, so like when he was gone by he didn't even last a year. He was gone by the trade deadline.
Gone at the deadline. And that was, even though Justin Smoke didn't work out and Cliff Lee is so much better than Justin Smoke, it was still a trade that the Mariners technically won because they gave up nothing to get Cliff Lee. Like, literally,
it was a great deal. It was a Jack Zarenzik is a genius.
Yes. There were so many trades where Jack Zarenzik seemed like a genius, and then just so many times where they just, the Ian Snell, Jack Wilson trade and a few other ones that just did not work out whatsoever. But, that first trade that brought in Gutierrez and, that was like, oh, I love this guy. And by the end of it, I was like, oh, I am not sad to see you leave. What?
Yeah.
So
ever. All right. Let's put it all on Michael Morse's shoulders.
Yes. Good old.
That's a great strategy.
Good old Mike Morse shortstop. All right. Here's another one for you. 7.3, 6.3, 4.5 pitcher, 3, 2.9 pitcher, 2.8, 2.8 pitcher, 2.7, 2.4, 2.3 relief pitcher, 2, and 1.9.
And 1.9. Okay, so that's...
I'm just going to give you a hint. This is a very good baseball team.
Right. Okay. I mean, is this like the 2001 Mariners? Is this
like
it's not the 2001 Mariners? But I'm gonna say this team won 89 games.
So this team won 104 games.
This team won 104 games.
Yes, this was the 1988 Oakland Athletics, which are just an absolute. It didn't end great for them, but
it ended great for you because you saw Ricky Henderson lead off with a home run watching this.
Yeah, that's true. It was a very important season for me.
I should have used context clues to realize who we were.
What's funny?
Who we were talking about.
I wasn't thinking about it when I went to the page, but probably
you went straight there. Your muscle memory just returned you back to your roots. The 1988. So the 7.3 that was at Canseco.
That was Canseco.
Okay, so that was Canseco, and then the 6.3 is probably Ricky Henderson.
That is correct.
Right.
That is correct.
4.5 is Dave Stewart. If we're going to remember some guys, let's see if I can do that.
Yeah.
For the 4.5 is Dave Stewart.
Yep.
The 3 is probably McGuire, I would guess. But maybe was he hurt for a bit?
He had a little bit of hurt, and he had a little bit of an average problem in 1988 as well. Number 3. Let's talk about wanting to remember some guys. Or number 4, excuse me.
Wait.
Carney
Okay, so
Lane.
if it,
Wait,
Carney
dang it.
Lansford,
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
And then all
And
those
then
other and then all those other ones are going to be like Walt Weiss, Mike Gallego, who else? Dave Parker's probably hiding her, and then Eckersley is the relief pitcher.
yep, relief pitcher. Bob Welsh, very high
Bob
on that
Welch.
list. Storm Davis, very high on that
Yeah.
list. Terry Steinbach, very high on that list. That was, I grew to hate the A's, but I definitely could appreciate just how dang good those teams
Those were
were.
good. Those were good teams. I
They
was
really were.
only my like obviously like late night like the early 2000s, late 90s when the A's were, the Giambi Tejada A's and obviously like, Zito, Hudson, Mulder A's is
Sure.
really what those Moneyball teams were. Oh, they did it with nothing. Oh yeah, except like three of the best starting pitchers in baseball year in and year out. Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
it was all Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
But ever since then, and they were real rivals because like I actually have some degree of sympathy for like the 2001 A's, who I think
No, me
won
too.
100. They won 103, maybe 105 games or something. They finished like 15, finished 12 games out of first place after
It's
having the
ridiculous.
second best record in the league.
Yeah.
But ever since then, I've never had beef with the A's on like a personal level. Like I do not like the Angels. I find the Angels to be a very annoying franchise. I obviously
Yes.
hate the Astros. I find them to be, and I don't
Yeah.
much care for the Rangers either.
Yeah.
Like the Rangers have always annoyed me.
Sure.
But the A's have always felt a little like, all right, if it's going to be anybody, I don't mind that it's you guys. And then I've always had a great deal of sympathy for their fans. We talk about suffering in terms of we've never been to the World Series.
Sure.
We don't often put a quality product out on the field, but even though we probably could and should. And the A's fans though, it's just a whole nother level of disrespect and I feel often disrespected by Mariners ownership and Mariners executives who want
Without question.
to turn the baseball field into like this never ending corporate retreat where a baseball game is possibly going on in the background as you like network, with your fellow like Amazon people. But the Oakland situation is just depressing and atrocious, and I feel very, very bad for those people.
It's disgusting, and
Yeah.
it's such a fun fan base that has been, everybody likes to talk about their low attendance and stuff like that. You wouldn't go to those games either. You would not, absolutely not support that ownership, and let's be honest, that ballpark either. And it should be on ownership to have created a better ballpark, but yeah, it's very depressing. So we just spent some time remembering some guys.
Right.
And
Love remembering
Mike,
some guys. Yeah.
Mike, you are a historian and a very, very good one. And I want to ask you, and this is probably a hard question to answer. Sports play such a large part in our society, right? And it's something that we talk about daily, but I want you to pretend it's 2884 and we're looking back on this era.
Okay.
How are people going to talk about sports? Like, is it going to be something based on like the research that you've done, like on minutia is probably not the right word, but I hopefully understand what I'm trying to say here. Like how important is sports going to be in history, do you believe, when we advance in a culture? That was not worded very eloquently, but hopefully the question made sense.
Well, I think there's two questions here. Like one that you're maybe driving at a little bit is like, is sports still going to be around in the 2800s? Sure. Okay, so let's set that one aside. Of course it will.
Yeah,
we love our little competitions. We love pitting people against each other in various shapes and forms. And so I think that like a historian working in the 2800s is going to talk about this era of sports being first and foremost simply another example of a continuously unfolding relationship between human society and the sports that they play that goes all the way back, like obviously, like we could talk about the gladiators and we could talk about the chariot races in ancient Rome. You can talk about the original Olympiads in Greece. You move forward from there and you have all like the knights, doing their, doing their jousting and their various duels and stuff that we're all meant to watch and enjoy. And then ball games come into it, in South America, ball games are coming into it in India and in China. And so this is something that is always going to be with us, both in terms of something that we do as recreational activities, right? Just in our own sort of normal lived lives, rec league basketball, softball leagues, like all that stuff is important. I think that there is something unique. Well, not really, because even when I go back to Rome, like God, the people were obsessed with chariot racers, and
Sure.
they really, really. I mean, there was whole political riots that would happen because of rival factions of chariot racing team. And there was a lot of money wrapped up in it, but there seems to be an awful lot of money wrapped up in sports right now.
Right.
And I don't mean that as a sort of in the sports ball criticism of like, oh, why do we spend so much money on what is ultimately a frivolous thing when we'd be spending this money on other more important things like medicine or helping the homeless, which is very true. But
Right.
also, like, I think that the amount of money is simply indicative of where society's head is at. And certainly, I think right now, sports involves one of the last great unifying cultural touchstones because with movies, with streaming services, with the way that we take in entertainment these days, it's all very atomized and at our own pace.
Mhm.
And sports is sort of the last thing that like you have to tune in at a
Right.
certain time in a certain place and then watch the thing unfold with us not knowing how it's going to turn out. So I think that sort of like, the post World War II boom in soccer and in baseball and in football especially, like the amount of money I think will probably be historically significant. And I'm not necessarily sure that will continue on in the future. There's always going to be something for sports to do. And of course, advertisers love it because it's the one time that they can actually capture our attention.
Right.
Um, but yeah, going forward this could possibly be like a maximal peak of how much sort of we're wrapped up as a society in sports as opposed to the other things that we have to focus on.
With those chariot races, what was kind of their ultimate demise, other than maybe just the demise of the actual empire?
Yeah, I mean, I really think it comes down to sort of a decline of the civilization in general,
Mhm.
where you sort of have less time and money to spend on those things, like as a civilization, as opposed to
Sure.
just people who are operating inside the civilization. But it lasted forever, and it was the main. People talk about like that, oh, they just want the bread and circuses, and it's like, well, I mean, yeah, a little bit,
Yeah.
yeah, a
Sure.
little entertainment's not so bad, if you're just plodding through an otherwise torturous life. Nothing wrong with putting a game on.
Was there a Michael Jordan of chariot races? Was there like somebody who really stands out in that regard? Maybe that's a little bit of a tough one.
Oh no, I'm not going to be able to remember some guys in
Yeah,
terms
that's
of
okay. That's
like
okay.
literally name,
That's okay.
but I know I can say quite confidently that like the most famous gladiators and the most famous charioteers were full blown
Sure.
celebrities. Like people knew who they were famous. They would themselves make a bunch of money. They were really well known and renowned figures. This is not what we're seeing right now with sports celebrity culture is nothing different than it's
Sure.
been. The guy who's the best at it is going to be known.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
makes sense. I can't help but like picture like a guy being paid to wear like a certain type of robe or a certain like a, an advertisement type of thing, before the chariot race. You know what I mean? I can't help but wonder if there was anything like that. Probably not.
Yeah, I don't think so. But like, I'm going to stop talking before somebody who really knows about Roman sports, which may which
Fair,
may not which may not
fair.
be anybody.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
I've seen Gladiator. That's and I'll probably see Gladiator 2 at some point as well. But
Yeah,
that's
I, j-
that's
I,
about
I
it.
just saw Gladiator 2, but we're not going to talk about that because I'm saving every thought I have for that for my own show, the Duncan and Co. History Show.
That's so selfish.
I know.
Speaking of selfish, Simply Seattle provides the very best in Seattle sports gear. Awesome stuff for the Mariners, the Seahawks, Kraken, Storm. You can find it all there. Use code MOLLYWOP15, MOLLYWHOP15 to save 15% off your order. It's a great local business. Really appreciate their support. Really appreciate you supporting them. All right. For the second half of the show, for those who are new to it, we do things a little different. We have our guest come up with the subject, and they cannot tell me what that subject is until right now. So, Mike, What are we talking about for the second half of the show?
Well, I'll tell you what we're talking about for the second half of the show. We are actually not straying too far from sports,
Nice.
because there is something, because like you said at the beginning of the show, I have lots of avenues and opportunities to talk about other stuff.
Yeah.
But when it comes to sports, like when do I actually get to talk about sports stuff? And
Sure.
that's why I'm always like, my policy is say yes to baseball podcasts so I can
Yeah.
come on and talk
Yeah.
about things. And the thing I want to talk about here is like what, like the experience of watching baseball games.
Okay, great.
And in particular, my son and I last summer went on a tour of the upper Midwest baseball stadiums.
Oh, that's
So
great.
we did 8 stadiums in 10 days. And then we have already been to Minneapolis, and we'd already been to see the Brewers. And so we went to see the Royals, then to the Cardinals, then to the Cubs, then to the Tigers, then the Guardians, then out to Pittsburgh, then come back through to see a Reds game, and then up and see the White Sox play. And so we knocked out 8 stadiums in 10 days, in addition to the 2 that we'd already been to. And then just this past June, we redid this a little bit over in California, where we
Nice.
flew into San Francisco. We saw the Giants, then we saw the A's, because
Nice.
like in all the years that I have been watching the A's and known about the A's and heard complaints about the Coliseum, I'd never actually been to the Coliseum.
Oh wow.
Yeah. I'd never actually set foot in it, and then I'd also never been to see the Angels play. So we went and saw Anaheim, then we went down to the Padres, and then we came back up and finished at Dodger Stadium. So we've been to like 13, 15 stadiums. I've been to 24 stadiums now, 21 that are still active, and then 24 stadiums total. And so like I now have a lot of thoughts about what makes a stadium good, what makes a viewing experience good, what I like about going to see baseball games, what I don't like about going to see baseball games now. So I'm hoping you have thoughts on this too. Like how many stadiums have you been to? Like what's your
So
what's
I
your
was
lifetime
just
count here?
that's a great one. So I have only been to one stadium that no longer well, I guess if Oakland counts as a stadium that no longer exists, I sure hope.
We're there now, yeah.
Yeah. So the 2 that I've been to that no longer exist are Minnesota, the good old Hubert H. Humphrey Dome,
Okay,
and
never made it there.
in Oakland. It was a fascinating experience. The seats were, you remember those kids like bleachers, or not bleachers, but like they were made out of plastic, Tyco type of like seats. That's what the seats were basically made out of in the Hubert H. Humphrey Dome. You faced the wrong way. You were basically like this for a baseball game because they made it for football. And it was the roof was wind controlled. So they were like, please hold on to your hat when you leave the stadium. I'm like, okay, sure. Literally lost my hat. As I opened the door, the thing just like, don't make fun of my hair, just went like that, just flat out and went off of my head. It was definitely something I'll remember, and very sad because it was a very nice hat. But I believe I have been to every stadium now except for Atlanta, Miami, Tampa Bay, and the 2 Texas stadiums. So I have been to a lot of stadiums now. I've seen a lot of baseball, and I have a lot of thoughts. I will tell you right now, my favorite stadium, it's actually not even close. It's Pittsburgh. I think PNC Park is the best stadium in baseball, and it's because I think that the ambiance is fantastic. The view is fantastic. There's just enough of the old school flavor mixed with some new stuff to make it just the perfect baseball park. I wish it was a better baseball team, but they're getting better. Paul Skeens certainly helps.
Yeah.
But I think that Pittsburgh's number 1 on that list. What would be number 1 on your list?
Oh, Pittsburgh. 100%.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, like, and I've seen, like, I'm like you, like, it's like, okay, I got to go to Florida to check off a couple. I got to go to Arizona to check off the Diamondbacks.
Oh yeah.
So I've done all the, like, the sort of the easy, you can knock out a bunch of them at a time.
Sure.
I was, so we had been to a bunch of stadiums going into Pittsburgh, and so many people had talked up that park to me,
right?
That and I've seen I've been to a bunch of games in San Francisco. You know, T-Mobile Park's a really nice park. You know, I've
Beautiful.
seen good stadiums. It's not like I'm coming from some dump.
Yeah.
And I was like, geez, I wonder if this is like, but I'm overhyping this in my head, and I'm going to get in there and I'm going to be disappointed.
Right.
And like, first of all, we roll into Pittsburgh. Nobody told me how cool Pittsburgh was, just as like a
Yeah.
town. Like my imagination had always been, oh, it's this, broken down Rust Belt exit. It's like, no, this is a beautifully rendered city in a
It really
beautiful
is.
natural environment.
Yeah.
It's all incredibly cool. So we come rolling in, and then we come into the stadium, and I'm just like, oh, this is like spectacular
It
in
is
a way that
phenomenal.
is, because the Pittsburgh skyline is so cool looking, and it's just everything about that stadium is like perfect.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's Pittsburgh, and it's not even close.
So I'm glad you brought this up because it was something I was actually thinking about asking you in the first half of the show. Because as a historian, I think that in 2884 or whatever year I made up there, Fenway Park and Wrigley Field are going to be two stadiums that I think like get talked about like as being famous historical things.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Mike, I think they're shitholes. And I think that I might be a little bit alone in this. Not completely. I know some beat writers who really dislike those stadiums, but I'm assuming you've been to both. I'm
I
curious your
have.
thoughts on both.
Yeah, I mean, like, my criticism actually of both Fenway and Wrigley is not that they're dumps. Because like I don't have, number one, I don't have to go to them all the time. I only go to
Sure.
them occasionally. And there is legitimately so much charm and
Yes.
so much, you just feel like you're in baseball when you're there.
Right.
And like the crowds are always good, mostly. I mean, it's Boston fans and Cubs fans, so like how good are they actually? But they're passionate. I will say this, they are passionate.
Right.
Right. Even they're passionate, they are invested, they are knowledgeable fans, and that's really cool. And the stadiums themselves are, it's a cool place to go see a game. So I never walked in and out of that being like, God, what a dump. But the thing that I don't like about them right now is just this move that they made in the last like 10 years, which is to just turn them into money printing factories. And
Right.
you're keeping that nostalgia, right? That is very incredibly evocative. Like even for somebody who's not from Boston, who's not from Chicago, like the Ivy in Wrigley Field is like, you know, it glows with how
Yes.
magical it is. But then the whole thing is just turned into this, this very sort of like homogenized cash based institution that is just about how do we cram more money in, how do we extract more money from these people, how do we turn this into a real estate empire rather
Right.
than a baseball game? That's what's going on in a lot of these places. That's what's going on in Atlanta. Like the whole point is to own real estate, not to actually like be a baseball team.
Mhm.
And so those kinds of things bother me. But neither of, I would put Fenway and Wrigley both kind of on the upper tier of places that I would recommend people go see baseball. You should go see a baseball game there.
Yeah.
Certainly not on the low end
No.
of stadiums that I've been to.
Well, I'll say this. If it wasn't for the fact that Boston and the Cubs, the Red Sox and the Cubs have that history, I would probably definitely put it in that lower tier. Like just going into the stadium though, it's not, to me it was not a great experience. And I was a little biased because I used to have to go to the Wrigley Field every summer for the Perfect Game All-American game, right? And
Mm-hmm.
you're not getting the MLB experience there. You're getting high school kids that are hoping someday to maybe be part of that MLB experience. And it's just a stadium. And I don't feel that way when I went and watched amateur events at PNC Park, when I went and watched amateur events at San Diego. I didn't get that same feel for the Cubs. If that major league experience isn't there, it's not there. And then for Fenway, I mean, I was uncomfortable. That's partially on me. This
Yeah.
beautiful body, it's not built for necessarily the defensive lineman in us.
Right.
And it just didn't move me the way I wanted to. Now, I was moved going into the stadium. Like, there's no doubt, like, as you're approaching this thing, that it's like, oh my gosh, this is like a mecca. This is a huge part of. It's also how I felt going into Yankee Stadium, the first one. So there's another stadium that that doesn't exist anymore. The new Yankee Stadium's okay. It's not great. It's not
Yeah,
bad.
I
It's
mean,
kind of there.
when I think about like I never made it to the old new Yankee Stadium. I've only been to the new Yankee Stadium.
Right.
Um, and I remain fundamentally underwhelmed by that
Yeah.
building. I think it
Yeah.
is a stupid stadium with
Yeah.
stupid amenities that it looks bland. It's so bland and
Yeah.
boring. They're trying to do this like we're a cathedral. Like, brother, go look at some cathedrals and then come back and actually make this a cathedral. My big recommendation, like if somebody hired me to come in and say, like, what should we do with Yankee Stadium, is like one of the things that I saw very clearly is that they have all these just like bare, like kind of tan walls. Like all the walls are just very flat and bland. It's like you bring in a team of like bas relief artists to turn this into like a sculpture vibe where you're doing like
Oh
the entire
yeah.
history of the city, the team, like everything about it.
Oh,
Like
that
you
could be
like you get
incredible.
this the kind of stuff that would be wrapped on like Marcus Aurelius's column or Trajan's column. You have that kind of work going into it and create something that's like really visually interesting and evocative. And right now it's just very bland and then the whole, the bowl of empty rich people seats, like
Yes.
all of that. Like I think that the new Yankee Stadium is probably my least favorite stadium
I
that
was
I've
gonna ask.
set foot in.
That's
Because like,
wow.
yeah, because like when we did California, because all like just to not to skip straight to California, but like all the
No.
stuff in the upper Midwest, like the Red Stadium, that's cool. Like,
Yeah.
the what used to be the Jake, I don't know what they call it now, but like Jacobs Field, that was a cool place. Tiger
Yeah.
Stadium, I
Sure.
don't forget what they call that too, Comerica.
Yeah.
Um, all of those stadiums were like really like pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed each of them in their own way. And then when we're in California, though, like we're talking about Fenway and Wrigley being the two oldest parks in baseball, like numbers 3 and 4 are Dodger Stadium and the Angels Stadium.
Mm,
And the Coliseum is also kind of ancient in its own way. I don't know
right.
where it sits on the official list, but like all of these, like I love Dodger Stadium. Like I had
Yeah.
also never been to Dodger Stadium, and I absolutely love Dodger Stadium, even though there's nothing special about it. It's just a stadium for baseball to be played in.
Right.
But I think that that's actually what gets me,
Right.
is that it is a stadium where baseball is played, and that's the only thing that is going on here. It doesn't feel
Yeah.
like a shopping mall.
No.
It doesn't feel like it's designed to have corporate junkets be held here. It feels like a place where just people come, sit down, watch a baseball game, and then later go home. And I really love that. And then the Coliseum in particular was it's impossible for, because that's the dumpiest stadium, obviously, like objectively, like the
Sure.
crappiest stadium in baseball. Well, I guess Tropicana Field has
Yeah.
obviously been in the running, and then I just saw some pictures of it a few weeks ago.
Oof.
It did not look good.
No.
Um, but walking around the Coliseum reminded me so much of the Kingdome
Sure.
that I just, I couldn't separate it. I was just like, just these slabs of concrete, and it kind of smells
Yeah.
bad. And like there's no line of sight when you're walking around. You got to go in and out of these tubes and then you walk out, and it's, the game that we went and saw was like A's Royals on a Tuesday night.
Oh man.
There weren't but 2,500 people in the whole stadium,
No.
which was great because
Sure.
I finally got a foul ball.
Nice.
In all of my years of going to see baseball games, never caught a home run ball, never caught a foul ball, never even really came particularly close.
No.
But
Wow.
you go to an A's Royals game on a Tuesday night in
You got a shot.
2024, and
You got a shot.
you got a good shot. And yeah, like first pitch of the game, dude fouled one off right into our section, and it kind of rattled around a bit, and I went and snagged it. And
Well,
I've
I'm
got
glad
it.
you're able to battle off Zach Hampel to get that ball, man. I know you were really, really. You know what's funny is only ball I ever got was a Mike Cameron home run in batting practice. That's the only time that I've ever been able to get a ball, and I've been to a lot of
Yeah,
baseball
yeah.
games. But
I was, and I was there with my son, and people were like, "Oh, you're going to give that to your son?" I was like, "No, man. I was 12 once too.
yeah, for
He can
sure.
have the next one, but I got to tell you,
Yes,
this
yeah,
one's for me and all of
yeah.
the me's that have gone before me who have wanted such a thing and
He
who have
can
never."
look at it. He can maybe touch it here and there, but this is property of Mike Duncan. I don't
Yeah,
blame you one bit.
exactly.
Do you miss the Kingdom? I got to tell you personally, I do miss the Kingdom sometimes. Like,
This nostalgically, Yeah.
Yeah, of course. There's just something about, you know, I tell this story a lot, but I went to my baseball game in Lacey, Washington, got rained out, and it was the third straight game that had rained out, and I just started bawling. And
Yeah.
my dad said, all right, let's do something. Let's go to the Mariner game. Let's drive up. Until from Lacey to Seattle is about an hour drive, depending on traffic. Now it'd be about an hour and a half because traffic is just terrible. But we get there and we have to listen to the first two innings on the radio, but we know we're going to be able to get seats because there's just nobody going.
Yeah.
And it's Mariners versus Red Sox, and we get in there right at the third inning. There's no score. Chris Bosio's issued a couple of walks, but no score. And we're watching the game and we're having a good time. And we look up and it's the seventh inning. And I point to my dad and I say, they don't have any hits. The Red Sox haven't had any hits.
Oh, brother.
It ended up being Chris Bosio's no-hitter. And it's so funny that like people will say, like, you know, there's only 12,000 people here, but there's going to be 50,000 people who say that they went to that game. Yeah. There wasn't no 12,000 at that game. It was like maybe 1,000 people sprinkled through that place.
Yeah.
And it was, you know, it didn't have the best view. The dimensions were an absolute joke, acting like that wall was going to be a deterrent for hitting home runs 310 feet into right field. Mm-hmm. I still crave those nachos, those awful nachos that were like 97% fake cheese and 3% maybe milk to make it so that it could actually be a dairy product. That malt ice cream with the wooden spoon that they gave you to eat, man. I miss that stuff. And you know, I can appreciate the new stuff too. I appreciate the newer experience, but there was something about that old school approach to doing things that I kind of do appreciate and miss sometimes.
Yeah. And like, I mean, for me, like it's the nostalgia is there because like, you know, you would go and you would have an entire section to yourself and you could just sprawl out, you know, it didn't matter. I'd bring books and coloring books and do drawings and just like treat it like your living room while also watching a baseball game. This is when I'm just like a kid. And, you know, people sometimes ask me like, are you a purist about baseball? Like you're a history guy, so you must be a purist. And I'm like, dude, I grew up watching like West Coast baseball with the designated hitter under a concrete dome with AstroTurf and like polyester uniforms. Like I don't have a purist's bone in my body here.
Right.
Because that's my experience. And so, you know, is T-Mobile Park, what used to be Safeco, is it better than the Kingdom? Yeah. In like every measurable way. Right. But like one of the things I did, want to talk about here is this experience of going to see a baseball game in those, you know, there's 162 baseball games in a season. So you've got 81 or whatever home games. You have so many games to go to that baseball should be treated like a thing that you can just say, hey, let's go to a baseball game today. Get some tickets, go in, get some cheap food, sit around, watch the game because there was one yesterday, there's one tomorrow, there's one the day after that.
Yeah.
And the fact that it has been really turned into this luxury event that you are meant to go and get. Now it's all gourmet food. And now you've got, you know, the tickets are more expensive. The parking is more expensive. Getting in the door is more expensive. The food is more expensive. The drinks are more expensive. And it's not just, you know, it's not just beer. It's got to be, you know, fancy beer.
Right.
And all of the amenities are better. But I think that at a certain degree, it's far less than the sum of its parts.
Mm-hmm.
When what baseball should really be, and now I'm just, this is my opinion, and so it must be everybody's opinion objectively.
Yeah.
Is that you're supposed to go and sit in some cheap seats and eat a cheap hot dog and drink either a cheap, you know, cup of beer or a cheap Coke, maybe get some peanuts, watch a game, go home. And that's what the experience is. And to keep the baseball game itself central to the experience, which I think is lost in a lot of places where it's become merely a background, a backdrop to what you're really there to do. To keep the game itself as the central focus and not apologize for baseball itself being worthy of your attention and being something that is cool to watch, which I think a lot of teams are very apologetic about the sport that they're running. And that's why
Right.
they constantly have to do like there's gimmicks between innings and there's all this stuff. Now I'm just turning into a boomer, right?
Oh,
Because it's so fucking loud.
yeah.
Um, and it's really like, God, how do we get these people to like this thing that we know probably they don't like? And one of the ways you could do that is just by having people engage with the game itself, by kind of dialing all that stuff back, which you find at places like Dodger Stadium.
Hmm.
And I was surprised by how much I enjoyed the Angels Stadium too. Even though
Hmm.
I don't like the Angels, I enjoyed that stadium too.
Sure.
And I will defend, for example, like if I'm going to go to a game in Chicago, I'm definitely going to see the White Sox, not the Cubs. Um, I like the new Comiskey Park that is called
Yes.
something else. Guaranteed. Is it guaranteed
Guaranteed
rate?
rate.
It's
Yeah.
still guaranteed rate field.
Yeah.
Terrible names
Just awful.
for all of these things. But
Yeah.
yeah, like walking around these like concrete concourses, just it's all so very utilitarian.
Mm.
And the food stands are just like hot dog, nachos. That's it.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
and then I come out to a game in Seattle and it's like, oh, I gotta get a $35 crab roll that's like it's like this big. It's
Yes.
tiny. And then I'd like to go stand over there in some oh, I see they roped off the standing room only area. So
Sure.
there's no
Yeah.
cheap way to get in the door. So
No.
I really think that like that's what I love about some of those, even though they're objectively dumps. Like even when I was at the Coliseum, I was like, this is I like this.
Yeah. And there might be some of the old man yells at cloud to this, but I totally agree with you. The one thing I want to make clear though to folks is that when you hear us talk about how these prices are insane, and they are insane, the price to park at T-Mobile Park is absolutely asinine. The price to get in the park, the price to get those beers, and I know they have some value stuff, but it's still very expensive. And asking a family of four to spend their entire fun budget for
Mhm.
one or two games a year is insane. Do not blame the players and their salaries for this. That is
Dude, nope.
not at all what it is
Not even
whatsoever.
remotely connected.
And people love to make that
I
connection
know they
because
do.
that's what they say is they take a look at Julio Rodriguez's contract and they say, well, that's the reason parking's $25. No, parking is $25
It's
because
not.
John Stanton wants to make a lot of money.
Yep.
Parking is, or your $8 gourmet hot dog is an $8 gourmet hot dog. It has nothing to do with Big Dumper getting an extension. It has
Yep.
nothing to do with them not being able to sign free agents. There's no connection.
They are two completely different parts of the budget
Right.
that don't even speak to each other. One is the supply and demand of amenities and tickets, and the
Yes.
other is player payroll, and never the twain shall meet.
Yes.
My other thing about why, because I love going to baseball games,
Mhm.
and the older that I have gotten, the more, and I think maybe too, like coming out of COVID, right? We all just like have
Sure.
reflection.
Yeah.
We all have these reflections about what it means to be a part of a society, and like, God, I
Right.
really did miss getting together with people. And so like going to see baseball games is a great love of mine, obviously. And one of the things that Major League Baseball wants to convince you of, absolutely, is that the only places to go see baseball games are Major League Baseball fields.
Mm.
And that the only baseball that actually exists is Major League Baseball. And
Yes.
that's the only kind of baseball that you should pay attention to or participate in or engage with.
Right.
And so as I gripe about how expensive it is to go see a baseball game, and there are ways to get around it. Like I can go see a Brewers game right now. There's view obstructed tickets that are behind Bernie's Chalet that are $5, and you go up. Yeah, so it's $5. You go up there. There's a section. You can only see about 1/3 of the outfield. You can see most of the infield, 1/3 of the outfield, and you can see Bernie like smoking a cigarette before he goes down the slide when there's a home run, or like being on the phone because he's got some life crisis that he's dealing with. You get to see all that. But the thing is, you go up there and it's like, it's the Brewers, so it's not like a full park. And no, the ushers don't care where you actually sit.
No.
And so my big piece of advice to people is to try to find those like insanely cheap tickets, $5, $10, that'll get you in the door, and then just go to that seat, sit in it, and then just go wherever you want after that. Nobody's actually going to bother you.
No, and no, that's a great point. Like one of the things I think is great about new stadiums is, walking around the Kingdome wouldn't be the best, right? Because of like how concrete it is and how you'd have to basically go through every single one of those actual
Yeah.
openings to be able to see anything. The nice thing about these new stadiums is there's so many openings for you to go
Yeah.
walk around and check stuff
Yep.
out. No,
Yep.
yeah, I think you were going to make another really good
Yeah,
point.
no, I was winding up to the main point, which is
Yeah,
that there are other kinds of baseball. There is, and not just minor league baseball, but like here, like I live outside of Madison, Wisconsin. Yeah, obviously you got a Rainiers hat on.
yeah,
But there's college wood bat league every year here that is
yes,
like go see a game. It's cheap to go see it. It's still really good baseball. It's not like
yeah,
they're the freaking Keystone Cops out there. They're just really really talented kids playing ball.
right.
The food's cheap. There's usually like carnival stuff for the kids to keep them entertained in between stuff. And then even like, going to see high school games. You've
Mhm.
got a local high school that's got baseball games being played. Going to see a high school baseball game is super fun.
It is
And then I've coached the last 3 years. I coached Little League for my son.
nice.
And I can sit around and get as much enjoyment and entertainment watching a bunch of 12-year-olds play baseball as I
Sure.
do watching, the Mariners play the Angels for the 4 gajillionth freaking time. I think I'm mad at the Angels mostly because I'm
Yeah,
just
yeah,
so
I can tell.
fucking sick of them.
Yes,
Um, but that's the thing is like they want to keep baseball behind this incredibly expensive paywall and say this is the only time and place and location for you to think about or care about baseball, and anything that's not this is just less than that. But baseball itself is a really fun sport.
yes,
Watching a shortstop make a great diving play in the hole and throw it to first base, I can see that. I can see that at the high school level. I can see that at the college level. I can see that in minor league baseball. I can see great pitchers. I can see home runs because they're all basically, as long as everybody's about the same skill set as
right.
everybody else, then you're going to watch like a competitive thing. And
Yes.
then, you dial it all the way back to baseball. And one of the things that the coaches and I have talked about is like, you see like a really spectacular play.
Mhm.
Like some kid make a really spectacular play. Like it's really, really fun watching the kid get to do that. But there is nothing actually more fulfilling and thrilling than just a routine ground ball to third base where they pick up the ball and they make a great throw to first and they get the guy. The most routine things in the world
Sure.
become like causes of great celebration. Like the way that the coaches react when the left fielder hits the cutoff man. It's like it's
Yeah.
we're as excited about that as we are about a walk-off home run. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, that's great. And that's one of those things too that it's I think unique to baseball. Like because I'm sure there's some stuff in football, where like oh, we finally executed a screen pass, or in basketball where oh, a pick and roll finally worked. The guy actually rolled at the right time. But in baseball, there's so much routine things that you take for granted that they're
Yep.
done by major league players that when you see especially if it's your own kin, like your own son or daughter making that play, there's something special about that. Seeing them be able to do something like that. I will also say, as a guy who has to watch a lot of high school baseball, there is something also fun about like if you hear about a kid who's going to get drafted, or especially if it's a pitcher, and going to watch these guys just dominate
Oh, because it
these
because it
kids.
because
Yeah,
everything I said about how everybody's roughly the same skill
yeah,
set, and then
yeah,
you'll get one
yeah.
Superman who's in there.
It's every once in a while, like you watch because they can't control it. Now, some of these kids go transfer to a better or better school so that they do face better competition.
Yeah.
But every once in a while, you get somebody who's in the King County League who should be playing for a Harvard Westlake high school, but is facing off against Curtis or up against Mount Tahoma, who strikes out 19 guys and makes it look super easy. And you
Yeah.
think, oh, this guy's the next Nolan and
Yeah, and
there is something fun about that.
my friend Mike Bates, who does the This Week in Baseball podcast
Great guy.
with Bill Parker,
Yeah.
he's told me the story several times. He was like a clubby for, and Mike, if you're listening to this, I apologize if I screw up your story or steal valor by telling this story that's not even about me. He was like a clubby for like a really really low minor league Pirates affiliate for
Hmm.
like 2 years, and when Andrew McCutcheon came through.
Oh wow.
And so like you sometimes like I would always have these questions like how does a scout how can you pick out one guy being like that much better than anybody else? Like if I'm trying to scout around, like what's the actual quality here. And Bates is like, oh yeah, well, you saw Andrew McCutcheon step onto the 18-year-old Andrew McCutcheon step on the field against a bunch of other 18-year-olds, and he's just playing a completely different sport. He's stronger, he's better, he's faster. You can just visibly see how
Yes.
much better he is than everybody else who's exactly his same age. They're all there because they are the world's most exceptionally talented baseball players, and then
Correct.
he's just
A notch above.
just a whole mountain's worth better than all of that.
It's so fun to watch. And, unfortunately, the best for me was basketball growing up, but AAU has kind of ruined that. But you would every once in a while just see not a LeBron James, but you'd see a guy who was a projected like Jamal Crawford at Rainier Beach, like watching him play against Olympia High School and just dominating these kids because they're the NCAA commercial. Most of these guys are going pro and something else. It's more true in high school than anything else that those kids are not ever going to step foot on a professional field. They're not going to step foot on a college field. They're nowhere close to that same level.
Yeah.
There is something special about seeing that. But like minor league parks, do you have a favorite?
Oh, I mean, the place I go to here in Madison is like a great field. This is the Madison Mallards, are like a college football league team, the Northwoods League.
Nice.
Which is it's a very nice facility. It's very easy to get in and out of. Everything's like low cost. Like there's not a bad seat in the house. It's all just bleachers, too. It's a lot of just like bleachers and seats. And it's the kind of thing where you can decide, oh, I'm just gonna go to a game. Like I wonder if the Mallards are in town. Oh, they are. Okay,
sure.
Let's pop over there and just like watch a game. I also have a lot of affection. There's the Portland Pickles.
Just gonna bring them up.
Yeah. So I love the Pickles
bring them up
because I got to throw a ball. I got to throw the first pitch out at a Portland Pickles game one time. And that's a little bucket list thing that I didn't know was on my bucket list, but then it got on my bucket list after the fact when they were like, come throw the first pitch out. So I have a lot of affection for the Portland Pickles too, who I've been a lifelong fan of since they asked me to do that.
I've been a lifelong fan of the Pickles, but it's funny you bring that up because they sent me a DM a few years ago saying, do you want to do this? And I said, absolutely. I would love to go throw out a first pitch.
Yeah.
And then they never responded.
They never responded to you.
And so Portland Pickles,
you were stood up by the Portland Pickles.
And I'm it's a 2-hour drive for me. It's an easy little trick, a little jaunt down to Portland. I was super excited to get to do it. And then they ghosted me, Mike. I think they saw that they could get the Mike Duncans of the world.
It probably was. It was probably the same day. And they saw how many followers I had on Twitter versus how many, which is how I got it. Cause I was goofing around I was at a gate. I was flying from here back home to Portland. And somebody was like, "You're going to go to a Pickles game?" And I was like, "I don't know, maybe." And they were like, "Come throw out the first pitch." But that's what you get when you start a history podcast about the Roman Empire 17 years ago.
So you're saying that picking a podcast about a mediocre baseball team was the wrong way to go about getting famous?
If your goal was to throw out a first pitch at the Portland Pickles game, then I think that demonstrably, objectively, we can say it is a fact that was not the way to go.
What a depressing end to this podcast. Mike, thank you so much for joining us. Please promote all the good stuff that you're doing.
Oh, gosh. I am doing many things right now. I have relaunched the Revolutions podcast after a couple years of dormancy when I finished the series. And I've come back to do a thing that I was always planning to do to end this show, which is to write a completely fictional historical account of a revolution on Mars in 2247.
Oh my gosh.
Where I am aping the style of the show. If you've listened to any kind of narrative history podcast, it's in that style, except every single thing about it is made up, including the historiography, including all of the history books that the narrator is reading in order to construct this history. And so that's what I'm working on right now. You can find that at the Revolutions podcast. If you want to come to Mars with us, that'd be great. And then I'm also started a history chat show with my friend and colleague Alexis Coe called the Duncan and Co. History Show, which is comes out every Wednesday, which is just talking about anything as it relates to the intersection of like history and culture. If there's a history angle to anything, we're going to talk about it. And like I said, that's why I didn't say like, hey, let's talk about gladiatorial combat. in ancient Rome, because in a couple hours I'm going to be recording with Alexis, where I will be giving all of my thoughts about Gladiator 2, Ridley Scott, Napoleon, and how he treats history.
Cannot wait. Please hit like, please hit subscribe. You can follow me on Blue Sky at Crawford Chris V. Mike, do you want to give your Blue Sky handle, or do you just not?
Yeah, no, I'm at Mike Duncan. I don't know
Okay.
what comes after that period.
Yeah,
But
way.
it's just Mike Duncan. I'm on. I guess I'm technically on Twitter too, but not really anymore.
Yeah, same.
Mm-hmm.
Big old same. Really appreciate you coming on again, Mike. Appreciate everyone who watched. Hit like, hit subscribe. Portland Pickles, if you're watching this, man, shame on you.
Hook Chris up. What? Yeah,
Hook me up. You got to have some lefties throw these things out too, man.
Hey, I'm a lefty too.